I'm in my house in Key West.
Looks like a nice, comfy place. I envy you. How long are you going to be in Key West? Can you hear me? Can you hear me at all? Sam, can you hear me? Oh, this is so awful. Um, damn. You can't hear me. I hate these things. Can you hear me at all?
I think it's broken.
No, I can hear you fine. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Because I just heard you.
I think my microphone is broken. I haven't been here for 18 months.
Okay, now John
And
Fassbinder just entered the room. Okay. Now, Sam, we still can't hear you.
well, I can hear you on the phone. I can't hear you. I've just returned to my home in Key West. I've been away for 15 months, and I don't and I should have tested the microphone earlier today, but I didn't.
Well,
It's
but
obviously
I can hear
I,
you perfectly.
over the phone. You can't hear me.
No, I'm
Over,
hearing you in the ear in the earmuffs.
well, I can't hear you.
Oh, how bizarre. John Fassbinder, can you hear me? Okay, maybe there's something wrong. Is this on? Yes, this is on. Blue light indicates that I'm connected. And now, why is John Fassbinder not appearing? That's interesting. Okay. But you can hear me over the telephone.
I can hear you on the telephone fine.
And I can hear you over my earphones.
Mhm.
Let's see.
And can everyone hear me?
What can we do here?
Well,
Okay, is this any better? John Fassbinder. It says John Fassbinder.
Greetings. Can you hear me?
Oh, okay. Now I can hear you. The only person we can't hear is Sam. But you can hear me okay?
I can hear you. I can't hear John.
Now, are you still hearing me over the telephone?
Yes, I hear you on the telephone fine, but I can't hear you. I think my microphone is probably broken. I haven't used this. I haven't been in this house for at least 15 months, and the thing has sat on the computer monitor, and I suspect that it's not working, except for the visual.
Well, the picture is excellent.
Yeah.
And oddly enough, we can hear you, which is the important thing is that the white people of America hear your voice.
Well, what about John Fassbinder? I can't hear him. I can't communicate with him.
And he hasn't quite entered the room, but it says he's entered. I don't know. I mean, I think that my system is fine. Hey, there he is, a young man. a young man. I can't believe we're all such a bunch of old fuddy-duddies around here. I can't believe I see someone who looks like he's at least 50 years younger than I am.
He looks like he's
Don't worry.
15 years
I'm
old. He
gonna
looks like a wee baby.
here. I'm just gonna make the audio come through these. I'm gonna disappear for a second, but I'm gonna be right back.
Why you look fine, but
I hear noise, but I hear him talking, but it's very faint. I can't really understand him.
let's see if I can get some support here, because we want this to work. For one thing, I want to hear about now. Do you have any polydactylus Hemingway cats?
No, I don't have any cats in Key West. I have left my cat in Atlanta in someone else's care.
But you've never had a polydactylus Hemingway cat?
No, I have seen them. I've gone to Hemingway's house and I've seen them, but I've never owned one.
Hey, can you come on and help Sam?
There
Because
you've gone. I can't hear you at all.
oh, well, because Sam is in his house in Key West and he's having trouble connecting. Well, you're in Florida, so you go help him in Key West right now. Okay, all right. Anyhow, we're on. Talk to you later. Okay, John. Suggestions. Oh, you've got is that a faces behind you?
Me?
Yes, that is a faces with a thunderbolt. You're trying to show what a good Democrat you are. Okay, well now we can't hear you. You're muted, that's why. John, you're muted. Ask to unmute.
Are we better now?
Yes, much better, but we still have a problem. Now, Sam, can you hear me at all?
I can hear you over the phone. I can't hear John very well.
Now, is there not any way that we can activate your look at your mute button on the screen? What does that say you're connected to?
Well, the mute button says that it says that I'm select a speaker, select a microphone. Well, let me see. To the right of it, it says, can you hear me now?
I've always been able to hear you, and not over the telephone, as a matter of fact. I can hear you just fine over the
test. I'm doing. Do you hear a ringtone? No, I don't hear a ringtone. Try another speaker. No, start talking, Charles. Talk.
It's the final day of fall. Tomorrow is the winter solstice. The days will begin to get longer. Hopefully, the white race will rise.
Say something.
John, you fill in here. What is this your invention, this flag behind you?
No, our graphics artist went ahead and designed it on behalf of the AFB. And yeah, it's not the formal party flag, but it is the flag of our workforce in action force.
It suggests a certain affinity for the party of Mussolini.
Yes, it might. We generally like to look at it, though, as being a pro-American symbol, a symbol for and by Americans. It, of course, has a lot of American history as well. Having been placed in a number of our government buildings and so on. So that's the way we generally try to look at it.
Not to mention on the Mercury dime for about 50 years.
Exactly. It's an American symbol in many ways as well. It's not as foreign as some may lead it to believe. but I think it's a good symbol. I think it's something that really represents what it is that we are trying to do.
Well, I know that Sam and I both have distinct sympathies in that direction. So I think we can relate to it. It's blue and white, and it looks a little bit like the flag of Scotland, doesn't it?
I suppose it does, especially with me being in front of it. Here, I'll stand up so you can see it a little better.
It's a very nice flag, and I want one.
Well, we can certainly go ahead and get you on.
Yes, Sam, what's going on with you?
Well, I've been trying different.
I mean, you see, I've got you dual connection. I can hear you loud and clear on. So basically, you just need to make, when you hit that mute button, you just need to make the microphone match your speaker. I think that would work.
Well, I suspect that it says select a speaker.
Right.
And I click on that, and it doesn't do any good. And then I go back, and it has same as system blah blah blah, and I try that.
How about built-in? Don't you have a built-in microphone and a built-in speaker?
I do, but like I said, this thing has been sitting for 15 months, and I speak, and I'm speaking, and I see output level that's going up and down, like I can't hear. There's nothing coming out.
You're broadcasting just fine. I mean, I do have you on the phone, but I mean, the phone is not on speaker, and it's a very faint sound, and you're coming over just over the the internet just fine.
Well, I don't know. Well, I've tried everything I can where it says there's a little upward pointing button next to the mute, and I click on that, and I don't. I tried various things, and they don't seem to work. So I may have to leave you and.
But no, you're broadcasting fine. So if you can hear me, I mean, I guess what I can do is, does this help at all if I hold the phone up? And John, you talk now and see if this will help any.
Test 1 2. Test 1 2.
I can hear him better now.
Okay, well, I'll just awkwardly hold the phone and we'll do a complicated low tech
I might know how to do this. I think I might know how to fix this. And that would require me to call in using cell phone and not Wi-Fi, which is what I'm using right now. So you can let me back in the meeting, right?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, one second.
I'm quite in charge.
Okay, great. Okay, one moment.
Anyhow, Sam, how long in Key West for?
Until the 1st of January.
Oh well, that's a nice thing.
My brother arrives tomorrow night at 9 o'clock, and I'll pick him up at the Key West airport.
The judge I worked for in Palm Beach covered the entire southern district of Florida, and there's a federal courthouse in Key West, and so at least once every other month we would sit in Key West.
Mm-hmm. Well, I know that courthouse well.
John Fassbinder. Are we doing any better?
Was bedeutet Fassbinder auf Deutsch?
Johann? He was fine. Okay, there you are. Okay. This is turning into a Three Stooge routine.
Yeah.
Oh God. As last days of fall go, just not too stellar. Um,
Well, it falls under my Fassbinder has disappeared.
and now he's calling me. You were fine before, and now you're gone.
Yes, I'm beginning to think that technical difficulties are becoming quite a large problem because now it's not allowing me to do much of anything. My computer is now updating, and
Your computer is updating. That was my excuse.
Yeah, I know. So it seems we've got a few issues, more than a few issues. I might. I know you expressed that you wanted to speak with me one-on-one during one of these podcasts too.
Well, but I wanted you to be part of the Sam Dickson experience.
I certainly would like to as well. It's not seeming to work out too particularly well, and I do unfortunately have another meeting at 9, but I was hoping I would be able to stand for like an hour. Right now, it's not working out too very well, but the only thing I could think of would be a group phone call, but then I don't see how it could be live streamed, so I'm trying to figure that out. I'm going to look into it. I'm going to contact one of the tech guys that we have and see if he can help us out.
All right, and if I can communicate with Sam, we'll talk a little bit and see what happens. But oh well, the last day of fall is the fall of man.
Seems to be. No, we'll get it squared away. I'm going to contact him, and I will let you know what happens. If I can get back on, I'll be there. If not, I'll see if we can get these tech problems squared away. But I will be in touch with you very soon regardless.
Die Zukunft ist unsere. The present sucks.
Wir sind das Anfang, nicht das Ende. Did you hear that, Charles?
Yes, I did.
You know what it means. You know what it means.
Anyhow, well, can we communicate for a few minutes here?
Yes, you and I?
Yes. Okay. I can hear you fine and you can hear me acceptably. Is that correct?
Yeah, I can hear you fine. Yeah.
All right. Anyhow, what do you do when you're in Key West?
I work on stuff that I do two things. I work on stuff that I brought down from Atlanta, and I work on stuff that I have neglected to work on here.
So is there any cause-related stuff in Key West?
No, I know no one here. The only person I ever knew with whom I could speak was my gardener, and he has now moved to Fort Lauderdale. So.
Well, anyhow, it's sad. I mean, basically, Key West, much like New Orleans, much like Miami, has become sort of a multicultural, heterodox, largely gay artistic community.
Not anymore. Key West is not like that.
Really?
Yeah. The gay community has moved on to the Atlantic coast of Florida, and their numbers are much reduced. And it's very white because it's so expensive to live here. The federal government is trying to break that. They've been turning naval housing over to Haitian refugees to try to break the whiteness. But Monroe County is the whitest county in Key West. Surprisingly, it has the highest graded schools, despite the lack of diversity of all counties in Florida. It has the least diversity and the highest scores.
Wow. I'm totally shocked.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense.
Oh, God. But you say it's the whitest county in Florida?
Yeah. It's 97% white.
87%?
97.
97%. Oh my God. I didn't know that was possible anywhere.
Well, it is until the government finds ways to move them in. Remember, there are no building permits allowed in Monroe County. They give about 10 building permits a year because of the necessity to be able to evacuate the population over the overseas highway. So they can't build anything new, and the houses run fantastic amounts of money. There's a house 3 doors down from me here that's on the market for $4.5 million. And that's an ordinary house. It's not a grand mansion. It's like a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house.
Wow.
It's surprising. People pay all this money to avoid diversity when they all say they love diversity, and they could buy a house somewhere else for 1/20th of that cost, and they could enjoy the diversity they prize. I just don't understand it.
Well, hypocrisy and denial are major features of American life, aren't they?
Yeah.
I mean, that's something that I realize over and over again, no matter what I'm looking at. Hypocrisy and denial of reality. It's just like without those two psychological problems, you know, nobody would. I mean, I guess they're not psychological problems; they're psychological defenses, aren't they? To the whole problem of cognitive dissonance. We say one thing, we say we believe one thing, but everybody, almost down to a man, is more comfortable with the opposite of what we say. And what's really ironic is that Black people and Hispanics are more comfortable around other Black people and Hispanics.
I'm
And
not sure that's true.
Hmm?
Blacks and Jews are the only people on earth who, if they find out they're not welcome somewhere, that's exactly where they want to go. My mother taught me, as your mother taught you, if you're not welcome somewhere, don't go there. But Jews and Blacks have the exact opposite idea. If you're not welcome, you crash in, you push in on people.
Is curious. I mean, I've had that approach towards city council meetings and historical preservation boards throughout the years. No matter how unwelcome I am, I try to find a way to get in. What is that's an interesting point. What is the status of historical preservation in Key West right now?
Well, there's very little to preserve in the way of anything that would be offensive to the reigning ideology. There's a Civil War monument in Mallory Square, but it's a monument of a Union soldier. Key West was one of 2 cities in the South that remained in Northern hands at all times. The unit of the Federal Army that was in Key West when Florida seceded toppled the city government and seized military control over the island. So it always was part of the Union. The people were sympathetic to the South, but that's being rewritten. There's a guy that used to run the archives here, and he got in the paper and was saying that it's a myth that the Key West supported the South, that people were against slavery and they were for the Union. This is absolutely false. There's no basis for that at all. At one point, they actually took the civilian population and loaded them on ships to deport them to the South because of their conspicuous disloyalty. But that was countermanded, and the ships were unloaded, and people were allowed to go back to their houses.
I've
The
never.
largest
That's
The
amazing.
largest collection of Civil War cannons is in Key West. They discovered they buried lots of them in the sand, and they've now been excavated, and so they're here. Mallory Square is still named Mallory Square, surprisingly enough, named for the Secretary of the Navy in the Confederate cabinet, who historians say was the most effective cabinet member in terms of what he did with what little resources he had. His
That's
mother is buried about 1,000 feet from where I'm sitting today. I live close to the cemetery, and they erected a park down near where the sunset celebration takes place, and they had statues of various people. I think they've even got one of Stephen Mallory. They wanted someone to make a contribution and have a plaque with his name on it. And so every other statue had somebody except Stephen Mallory. So I tried to make the contribution, but someone beat me to it. That would really horrify them to have my name on monument to Stephen Mallory. As the Bible says, it is more blessed to give ulcers than to receive ulcers.
Oh my gosh. Well, so in any event, what I had meant to talk about, if John had been here, was political activism and the future of political activism, which you almost seem to be saying is pointless. In most of our meetings, you say that there's no point in trying to work within the system. By the way, that you've got do you have a flashlight on your phone?
I do, and I need to turn it off. You're absolutely right. 1 second, let me get rid of this. Oh, come on, come on. Oh, wretched thing. Well, it won't stop.
I think it's amazing the tiny little lights that they have on these phones are so bright.
Well,
They're
and now,
really very excellent flashlights.
there it goes. Now it's off.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
Well, anyhow, I had meant to talk to John. John is, just to introduce you, have you ever met John before?
No, I've never heard of him. I was going to ask him what Fassbinder bedeutet auf Deutsch. What is
I
a
don't.
Fassbinder?
I'm not sure. I actually have no idea.
A Fass is an outlet or a spigot. Der Faust von Vater Rhein wird niemals leer. The spigot from Father Rhine will never be empty, referring to wine. It will just keep flowing with the wine.
Well, I have never asked him, but if he ever comes back, or if we can have him on a future show, we'll definitely see what he knows about his heritage there. But he is, I believe, given the title of executive director or something like that of the American Freedom Party, and I thought it would be interesting to have you and he talk about the possibilities of change within the system, because obviously if you're going to have a political party, it sort of it presupposes some willingness to participate in the system, and you more often than not say it's time to give up on the system. We just need to wait for Ragnarok, in effect.
Well, that's not quite
Götterdämmerung.
right. That's not, I haven't made myself quite clear.
Okay, make yourself clear now.
I don't think there's any hope ultimately through the system. I don't see dropping pieces of paper in ballot boxes as being a means of salvation. But you certainly could run a sort of guerrilla war campaign to make the system invalidate itself and make it ludicrous. And the American Freedom Party could do things like that. They could look for opportunities to make the head table look silly. Do you remember Jeremy Thorpe in Great Britain?
I know the name, but I don't know what to
Head of either the Labor Party or the Social Democratic Party. I think he was
probably Social Democrats.
Yeah,
Maybe is that Social Democrats the same as the Liberal Party?
Yeah, they were ever to create a new party, bringing some of the less hostile and radical elements of the Labor Party in with the Liberal Party. But anyway, for a while it looked like they were going to break through and actually become a real significant party. But Jeremy Thorpe apparently was unfortunate enough to have a same-sex preference, and he liked guys, and he had an affair with what they call a rent boy in Great Britain. That is a young male who prostitutes himself to homosexual males. And he got concerned about this. I don't know if the guy threatened to blackmail him or whatever, but he tried to kill the guy. He hired someone to bump him off, and the guy missed and killed the rent boy's dog. And so Auburn Wall, you're familiar with the Wall family.
Oh yes, of course, Evil and Wall.
You know, they're outrageous. They're like the Mitrus. They're outrageous people. Well, Auburn Wall, Evelyn Wall's son, qualified to run for parliament against Jeremy Thorpe in the next election. And he ran as the candidate of the Dog Lovers Party. And he took his pet dog to all of the debates and sat on the platform petting the dog while Jeremy Thorpe was trying to speak. So you can do things like that to make the system look ridiculous.
That's an unusual opportunity, though. That sort of thing doesn't happen every day.
But there must be occasions like that. You know, I would have to think hard of how you could come up with stuff like that. But you could certainly embarrass these people.
Well, I mean, if I don't know. I mean, that just sounds almost too unique, too good to be true. It just won't happen
true.
twice.
It is absolutely true. But there are other things you could do. You could run an occasional candidate when you want to defeat a conspicuous Southern or Republican traitor. You know, you could run somebody against Lindsey Graham, for instance, the shill for the military-industrial complex. This was done some years back in Michigan when they had a senator, a Republican named Spencer Abraham, who was an immigration enthusiast posing as a Republican. And somebody got on the ballot as an immigration restrictionist and was able to draw about 5% of the vote and was able to defeat Abraham for re-election. So you could do things like that. You could go to their fundraising events like Lincoln Day banquets and hand out leaflets and hold signs that would embarrass them. Here's an example. In Georgia, we have this governor, Brian Kemp, who is a terrible person. And he issued orders that there would be no arrest and no interference with the black mobs that invaded the white northern suburbs of Atlanta in the wake of the George Floyd incident. And these people were allowed night after night to invade these white neighborhoods and loot and burn. And they did tens of millions of dollars of damage. Not one single person was ever prosecuted for that, primarily at the governor's orders. Well, I don't think most Republicans are even aware of this or have thought through how striking this is, that we have a state in Georgia where black mobs of one race can engage in sustained mob attacks night after night after night, with the governor who's charged with maintaining law and order, issuing orders to the police not to enforce the law. If that were placed forthrightly before Republicans attending Lincoln Day fundraisers, it might cause Kemp some embarrassment. So you can do things like that. But the idea that you're going to send 435 Mr. Smiths to Washington in the House or 100 in the Senate, or enough that Mr. Smith goes to Washington to actually change anything, that's just childish thinking. It's really mentally ill thinking. The numbers just aren't there. The time for that was 1952 or 56. The numbers just aren't there. You can't do it.
I guess I've always had this idea that it might be possible, and I wish John was around if somebody else was around to talk about this. I keep thinking that it might be possible to persuade a significant number of blacks and Hispanics that they need separation, that separation is really and truly in their best interests. And, you know, you say that black people like being where they're not wanted. I know a lot of black people in New Orleans, and they are remarkably honest about how they feel much more comfortable around other black people, and they really don't in any sense crave white company. They feel some of them will even admit that they feel inferior around white people, and they don't like that feeling, and they don't
Well,
feel.
they might, but that kind of feeling is the basis for communism and for violent attacks on people that have things. No, to have these two races that have very different talents that are always going to be living on very different levels and living in close proximity to each other is just always going to be a formula for friction and strife.
Well, exactly, and I mean, because of that formula, and because it's obvious that that is a formula, persuade. That's why I think that persuading, that we could conceivably have a political movement where we would popularize our views among both black and white people and Hispanics, and oddly enough, the best example of what the benefits of separation are the Jews. They have maintained whatever else we can say, the Jews have maintained the oldest continuous ethnic identity. Whether it's true or false doesn't matter, but they've made there have been a group of people called Jews or Hebrews or Hapirus since the new king, at least the new kingdom of Egypt, over 3,000 years ago, in the time of King Tutankhamun and his daddy Akhenaten. There were Hapirus and Shasus and Hyksos, the shepherd people, and they have maintained somehow or other an identity, and whether we like it or not, that's quite an accomplishment.
There's no question about that. I think
I mean,
imitation is the sincerest form of flattery, and we need to imitate the Jews. We can learn a lot from Jews. They don't want us to do that. It's anti-Semitism for us to behave the way they do.
So, if we were to, I keep thinking that it would, as much as it would gall a lot of people in our movement to say so, our best real world political agenda might be to say, we agree that Black lives matter, and that's why blacks need to be separate.
They're not going to fall for that. They're quite smart.
Oh, you think that's trick?
Yes, it's a trick. But blacks are smart enough. They understand that they can only have a high standard of living through socialism with a lot of people they can exploit. They're not dumb. I saw David Duke try that argument in a debate with a black historian at Atlanta University, and he was prepared for it, and he just brushed it aside, and the audience was completely on his side, that they weren't buying that. They know that they are living off of a spoil system, a racial spoil system, and they're not going to give it up. 3/4 of all blacks who have jobs work for government. Only a quarter, the unemployed and those who work in private enterprise make up only 25% of the black people, adults. And when you take the unemployed out, it means that probably 5 or 6 times as many blacks work for government as work in private enterprise. And most of the ones who work in private enterprise are imprisoned in minimum wage jobs at McDonald's. And the ones who aren't are the beneficiaries of federal pressure, where they have to hire these phony vice presidents and give them cushy corporate positions. Libertarians are wrong. If you had a libertarian economy in America and you got the government out of all these things and gave jobs based upon ability, blacks would be living like they do in Haiti. And they're smart. They're on a very practical level. They understand this, and they're not going to be tricked into having their own independent society. They're not going to do that.
So I go back to this question I've tried to get to pin you and several other people down on. How will we ever form an ethnostate?
Well, I think we only form one when the system presently collapses, when whites are cornered and they can't move another exit up the expressway to solve the problem for 7 or 8 years. And that day is coming. You know, the pressure is really on whites now. Trump has done marvelous work for us. The greatest thing Trump has done for us is that he's convinced most of the people in the Republican Party that the system is a fraud. This is a big step forward. Roughly three-eighths of the American people now believe that elections are stolen, that there's no integrity in the system, and the system's a fraud. That's a great achievement in only about 3 years.
Well, I mean, I believe you're always quoting the New York Times. I think that the New York Times had a headline this morning, something about the Trump's unassailable supporters, or I forget, you used a colorful word to describe people who will not change their mind, unshakable, something to that effect. And obviously, a large part of that is because things like yesterday in Colorado. Yesterday in Colorado, the state Supreme Court found that Donald Trump could not be listed on the Colorado ballot because he was an insurrectionist, a rebel. Imagine Donald Trump, a rebel. Yes, you grin from ear to ear, and so do I. It is so preposterous to think that.
It's so preposterous because these people in that Supreme Court, one of them is a Harvard Law graduate, and they all have these impressive resumes. What they're saying is that the 4 of them have the power to keep somebody off a ballot without any kind of legal proceedings. No one has established in a court of law that he is an insurgent, but they have said that that's not necessary. They can read the newspapers and can decide that he's an insurrectionist. And this just shows once again how the American courts just throw the law and the rules of evidence and all the things we're taught in law school out the window. They mean nothing.
They didn't quite throw the rule of law out the window. Have you looked at the 213-page opinion from the Colorado Supreme Court?
No, you're much better than I am. And what did they say?
They have about 25 pages on hearsay and how all these exceptions to hearsay can apply to establishing his status as an insurrectionist.
Oh, wonderful.
So they didn't quite disregard the rules. They just, twisted them and created a beautiful liberal pretzel factory.
That's the wonders of the common law system.
Yeah.
Hopeless.
And so that's. But I mean, I think that what you were saying about what's been accomplished since the election of 2020, it's so obvious that that the left is scared to death of a man who barely deserves the label of conservative. He barely deserves that label, and yet they're so scared of him basically because of his personality, and because he can't be coerced to act normal the way they want a good I mean, is he really more? You were talking about Lindsey Graham. Is he really to the significantly to the right of Lindsey Graham?
I don't believe in terms like left and right. I don't think Trump or Lindsey Graham have any consistent philosophy. Lindsey Graham is just show for the military-industrial complex. He's a warmonger. He has no children to risk in battle, and he's willing to send everybody else's kids off to battle so he can strut around and play Winston Churchill. He's sort of like Liz Cheney and Daddy Dick Cheney. And McCain. They all cut from the same bolt of cloth. warmongers and shills for the military-industrial complex. It was Lindsey Graham, who was one of the senators who went to Trump and threatened Trump that they'd vote to impeach him after the election if he did pardon Edward Snowden. So you know what you're dealing with when you deal with Lindsey Graham. He is happy to have the whistleblower be the only man wanted for prosecution in the biggest criminal violation of American civil liberties in our nation's history. Not one of the people that implemented this criminal system, not one of them who lied about it and denied it existed in testimony before the Houses of Congress, not one of them even saw the inside of a grand jury room. The one person who is wanted is the guy that told the American people the truth. And that's what America is. That's what America stands for. So how do you have faith in a country like that?
People are, and as you say, people realize that the judicial system has ganged up on Trump for reasons that have nothing to do with law. And I mean, you know, why isn't there a movement to say that everyone who participated in the George Floyd riots or in the so-called LA uprising of 1992, why are they not all disqualified from offices of trust under the United States? And why hasn't that been just established beyond reasonable doubt? Because that would be at least some sort of reasonable precedent for applying the 14th Amendment, wouldn't it?
But none of that matters. You know, if you're looking for consistency, you'll find it in the dictionary. You know, these people are about power. All they care about is power. And these people are ruthless. We have to understand how ruthless they are. People like AOC and Anderson Cooper, Mary Louise Kelly, they would happily take all of us out into the Catine Woods and put a bullet in the back of our heads. I'm sure of that. They are liars. They have killed people through their lies. Their lies about George Floyd led to the death of 5 policemen in Dallas. They've never even mentioned their names because they don't give a damn. They're interested in lying and getting money and putting groceries in the pantry. And if those cops have to die, Anderson Cooper and Mary Louise Kelly don't give a damn. And they wouldn't give a damn about us being taken out and having a bullet put in the back of our heads like the Polish army officers were in the Catine Forest. We're dealing with very ruthless people. We cannot be in the same country with them. Not only can we not be in the same country as these rival racial groups, we can't be in the same country with these crazed fringe whites who will not play by the rules.
But how are we going to reorganize it if we don't? If it's impossible to achieve any step-by-step progress in the political arena, if there's no way of selling the idea that separation is good for everybody, that, you know, as I always put it, good fences make good neighbors, is just the oldest of all aphorisms in community living. If we can't make any progress on that, I mean, can you give me any scenario that you must have imagined a scenario under which change can occur?
I just think it's obvious that the system will fail. It's going to fail. And when it does, people will be looking for another solution. Americans, the average American moves every 4 years. We're a nation of gypsies. People came here as gypsies from Europe. They were willing to leave their towns that the families had lived in for hundreds of years and come to America to get an extra helping of sauerkraut or to grow tobacco in Virginia or to set up a religious community in Plymouth Rock. The Americans are very inclined to move around. Well, easily they could move around and separate the country. There are also things you can do in terms of civil disobedience. Our people, I think, oscillate between total despair and dreaming of some kind of a upheaval and a civil war and all this. Those aren't the only solutions. Just civil disobedience could bring a stop to it. Stop obeying the laws, stop paying the taxes, stop giving any respect. People like Lindsey Graham start treating them in public with the contempt they deserve. And I think this would end. You know, the police up in New York City embarrassed that previous mayor, whose name I can't think of, de Blasio, is that it?
De Blasio.
In New York City, they had a mayor named de Blasio.
Yeah, de Blasio.
Well, a cop got killed, and politicians love to pose with guys in uniform, whether they're police or military. And de Blasio, for all of his anti-cop, pro-criminal outlook, just couldn't wait to get his fanny down at the funeral and to speak at the ceremony about this cop. And so he got up and he thought it was going to be a great photo op. And he started talking about the cop and how terrible it was he died. And cops in the room began standing up and turning their chairs around and facing the opposite wall until the whole room consisted of cops staring at the opposite wall with their backs turned to de Blasio. It turned into a catastrophe for him. Little things like that can be done to embarrass these bastards.
Interesting, but again, kind of a unique opportunity.
Well, there are lots of these opportunities, and you know, and the thing is just America is just grinding down so fast. Yeah, I've never believed in collapse. I've always cautioned people not to believe in collapse, and I still caution people to plan their financial lives based upon something other than the idea that we're going to be killing each other in the street for a sack of dried banana chips in 6 months. But you know, you just see it every day. I had to go to the courthouse 2 weeks ago for a hearing on the tax appeal. I used to be able to drive from my house to the courthouse in about 25 minutes. I left 45 minutes before the hearing, and I barely made it on time. And the reason was that all the way down Peachtree Street, I live close to Peachtree Street in Atlanta, and the courthouse is close to Peachtree Street. So my route basically is straight south on Peachtree Street. All the way down, there were cars and trucks that had just parked themselves in the curbside lanes of Peachtree Street. Amazon trucks were a lot of them. Amazon drivers feel they have a right to just park on a major thoroughfare and block everybody because it would run up the cost for Amazon for them to have to park like other people and take the package in to the recipient. Well, tough. No one ever gave Amazon an exemption from the rules of the road. And if Amazon incurs extra expenses because they have to park the trucks and have the drivers go in from the parking lot, well, that's tough. Amazon will have to charge more, and that will be a competitive advantage to people who own stores that right now are at a disadvantage with Amazon. But it wasn't just Amazon drivers that were blocking the road. It were all kinds of third world people. Some of them were just sitting around the car, in front of the car talking. Some were getting out of the cars. Some were returning to the cars. They were overwhelmingly obvious immigrant populations. And the result was Peachtree Road at 2:45 in the afternoon was absolutely jammed because two lanes, one on either side, were blocked by these bastards that wouldn't obey the rules. That doesn't happen in places like Copenhagen, or at least it didn't happen before they got a big immigrant population. But America is just at a tremendous disadvantage. There are all kinds of things like this that are just devastating America. The post offices closed for lunch. Have you noticed that?
Say that again?
The post offices in America now closed for lunch.
Oh, well, so are a lot of pharmacies.
Well, that's different. That's when private business wants to run itself into the ground, they can close for lunch. But the post office, and there's no set hour. It's at the whim of the postmaster. So some of them close. One day they can close at 11 o'clock. Another day they can close at 1:30. And I've gone down to my post office box in Atlanta, and I've seen that happen. I got there at 11:05, and the sign is up. They're reopening at 12:30. I've gone there at 1:30, and there's a sign up. They're opening at 3 o'clock. And sometimes there are 40 or 50 people waiting to get in to mail their mail and to pick up their mail. This doesn't happen in Switzerland. It probably doesn't even happen in Italy. I don't know that it even happens in Port-au-Prince, but that's the way America is. They're just all kinds of little things, thousands and thousands of things like this that are running America into the ground.
And yet it's been getting worse and worse and worse. And I mean, again, I say what I've said before. I have been hearing that the collapse is imminent since I was old enough to understand that phrase.
I have too.
And there seems to be a certain brilliance to the whole thing. I mean, you were saying that the system would collapse if people stopped paying taxes.
Well,
That's not.
I'm not advising people to do that, by the way.
Okay,
I'm not advising them.
But you do know that that's absolutely not true, right?
What?
The system would not even notice effectively if people stopped paying taxes.
Well, about that.
Hmm?
If the white Americans had a tax strike,
Yeah. If you go, I mean, you've never gone on the websites of the Federal Reserve banks?
well, but it would spiral out of control. It's spiraling out of control right now. The real inflation rate is about 20%. Old people and people on Social Security and pensions are seeing their standard of living collapse. The idea that we're having 3.4% inflation, you have to be the kind of person that believed that the Fuhrer had secret weapons, or that the collective farm cabbage output was up 500%. You have to be that dumb. Germans and Russians had better sense than that, but Americans so far still believe this claim that we have an inflation rate of 3.4%. But we don't.
No, I mean, that's certainly obvious, but nonetheless, that's the only real impact of the income tax, is supposedly putting a brake on inflation. And as you say, it's really not very effective. And
Well, I think they're just all kinds of ways. If the white people in America abjured the realm, to use an old English legal term from the Middle Ages, where you swear off allegiance to the king and the system would collapse. The system can only survive if people believe in it and play the game. If you just say, we're not playing your game, you're illegitimate, you're a fraud, you people are criminals, we're not playing your game anymore, it would fall apart.
Well, there's obviously a hope to that effect, but as you said, people already don't believe in the system, and it's doing relatively well.
Well, people have only lost faith in the system in the last 3 or 4 years. Most people have had faith in the system for a long time, and a lot of people still do. I think the majority of people believe the inflation rate 3.4%. Obviously, a lot of people believe there's no election fraud in America. They can read about the Democratic National Committee trying to block Bernie Sanders by all kinds of illegal activities on behalf of Hillary Clinton, but somehow on election day, they think these people become Boy Scouts, and every vote is very carefully counted. Well, you have to be a fool to believe that. But gradually, I think people are catching on that that's not so. But this system cannot work. It's only worked because it's never been challenged. There's been no real challenge to the system in America really since the Civil War. There's a slight challenge in the Depression in 1929. But, this country's never been through what Russia has been through, what Germany's been through, what France has been through, what Britain went through. We've never had a war that was really very costly. The standard of living in America in World War II, the civilian standard of living went up.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, and
it was
one
recovery
like that in Russia, one like
recovery
that in
from the
Germany.
Depression.
And in America, this system has never been tested, and the proof comes with the test. The Tsarist system was working fabulously from 2006 to 2014. Russia had the highest rate of growth of any nation on earth. Russia was going gangbusters. But World War I tested the system, and the system broke down. And I don't think our system can stand up. We had this silly little war in Vietnam, a war, by the way, which I was opposed. I was on the side of the hippies and against the war. But we lost 50,000 men in that war, and the country almost came apart. There was mobs, riots, hysteria, all this stuff going on in the country. Great Britain lost more men with 1/6 of our population. It lost more men in the first day of the Battle of the Somme in World War I. A single battle, a single day, a nation with 1/6 of our population lost more men than we did in the entire Vietnam War. And the next morning, people got out of their beds, had a cup of tea, and went back to the factories to resume working. The country didn't fall apart. Do you think America could withstand that kind of thing? No, obviously not. We could barely stand the Vietnam War.
The 60s was a very interesting time. And I mean, I wonder, you say that America has never been challenged. You don't think that the 1960s was a kind of major challenge to American way of life?
No, the American system was behind all of that. You recall, you're old enough to remember the incredible favorable publicity given to the hippies, to drug users, to the SDS. You couldn't have bought the kind of publicity that they got on 60 Minutes and CBS and New York Times. They were described in glowing terms. I remember reading the New York Times magazine section, Wolfie Rabinowitz, the chairman of SDS at Yale, stands at the podium, his hair blowing in the wind as this handsome, idealistic youth looks into the future. It's just this kind of cloying, saccharine, sugary crap that you would expect to give to Stalin. They popularized all that. If they hadn't popularized that, they could have had everybody signed up for ROTC and wearing crew cuts and going vegetarian and drinking milk and never smoking. But the system itself created these people. It ballyhooed them, it glorified them. The courts were on their side. You remember the ringing decisions in the courts that when the hippies would wear their armbands into the high schools and stuff and desecrate the American flag. The federal courts had a little mantra in their decisions that you don't check your rights at the schoolhouse door. Well, we've learned in our time that if you wear a Confederate flag or a Confederate lapel pin, by God, you do check your rights at the schoolhouse door. It's all a fraud. It's just a complete fraud.
So you don't think that the effect it had on the older generation, the parental generation, was a crisis?
No, they were too comfortable. They weren't uncomfortable. Same thing happened in the desegregation crisis. All across the South, white parents decided that, well, integration is good for good business, as the Chamber of Commerce used to say. Yeah, my daughter might get raped and my son might get stabbed, but I have to think about my pension. And that's what white parents thought about all over America. So you've got to get a situation in which everybody is suffering. And we're getting there. It's coming.
It's interesting you mentioned pensions. I've been told more in Europe than the United States that people's loyalty to the government is entirely about pensions.
Well, I think that's a big factor. And the fact that here again, you start looking at how shaky America is. Most of the pension plans in America are not funded. America has promised pension benefits, both publicly and in private pensions, that it cannot possibly deliver. The money isn't going to be there. The boomers are going to retire, and they're going to find out that those pensions are going to be drastically reduced the way they were in Detroit, when Detroit declared bankruptcy. And they got shed of all those pensions, those old white people that used to work in Detroit. They cut the pensions back to what, 38%. And that's going to happen everywhere. The money just isn't there. You have constitutional guarantees in 25 states that no pension of a government employee can ever be reduced. It's constitutional law. They had that in Michigan, and the pensioners, they went to court to try to stop the bankruptcy in Detroit that was going to take away 62% of their pensions, and the court just laughed them out of court. No, this is a federal bankruptcy court. We don't give a damn what the Constitution of Michigan says. And besides which, the money wasn't there in Michigan. You have cities in places like Michigan and Ohio and Illinois, Indiana, where the major industry has closed and where the houses are now selling for 20% of what they did previously before the factory closed. And a third of the houses are empty. And the cities are dependent upon property taxes. They can't pay the pension. And there are all kinds of people, lawyers, lots of lawyers are in firms and think they're going to retire with big pensions. And when you check the records, it's like a jet airplane with the oxygen sucked in on one side and the flame coming out the other side. The whole basis of paying the pension is that they're going to be young lawyers working there, paying a lot of their money into the pension plan so that old people can go to Boca Raton and play golf. And all they have to do is close the firm. The young lawyers, when it gets bad enough, are just going to change the name of the firm. It's going, instead of being Lincoln Dickson, it's going to be Adam Smith, and they're going to move across the street, and that's going to be the end of the pension. I'm astonished at how many lawyers think they're going to get pensions, and these are lawyers. And you start asking questions: well, is your firm's pension funded? And then no, there's no pension fund. It's just a profit and sharing plan where the young lawyers are paying this money out to give money to old people.
Of course, what's the model of that?
Sorry?
What's the largest national model for that kind of pension?
Socialistic security. Yeah.
There has never been a Social Security trust fund.
No. And Congress never resists an opportunity to expand the benefits, to bring in another class. Children can get the benefits now in certain circumstances and stuff like that. So there are just so many things in play. It's going to break down, and white people are going to have a choice. They can either take radical action to create their own state and get the hell out of this mess, or they can just go extinct. And they may just go extinct. If they do, the world will be better off. Europe will be better off without an America bullying it. There'll be no more America bullying people like Hungary and Russia to take in more immigrants. America won't count anymore.
Now that's interesting. On Sunday or Monday, I got a request from one of this show's, one of my longtime viewers, who asked, should white people move back to Europe?
If they would have us, you could, but there's not enough room there. Russia, is encouraging people to move back. They're encouraging bull farmers to go to Russia. They're giving them farms and things like that.
How much response is there? But I mean, I can't think of a more unpleasant and radical change from the paradise of South Africa, climate-wise, anyhow, to farming in Siberia.
Well, you're tough enough, and it's either that or get killed by the people running South Africa. So what's the choice?
It's interesting. There are a bunch of South Africans who've moved to Mississippi and Alabama. I don't know about Georgia. Have any moved to Georgia that you're aware of? Yeah. Some of them admitted that I've met have admitted that they moved to Mississippi because they thought that there was white supremacy there. They were sorely disappointed.
Well, you always hear these crazy claims in the media. They're just fantastic. They claim that 70,000 blacks were lynched between like 1870 and 1935. This is just outrageous. I've met people that actually believe this kind of stuff. I went to Europe in 1972, and I went behind the Iron Curtain. And I went to one of the places I visited, which was Czechoslovakia. I went to Prague, and in the communist system, you didn't have a lot of hotel rooms with individual hotels with individual rooms, you had to go to a centralized tourist agency that would assign you a room. So I got up to the counter, and this rather snippy, unpleasant bureaucrat said, well, how many people? And I said, one. And she said, we don't give any rooms to single travelers. You have to get a roommate. And so there was a guy behind me who said, I'm traveling alone. Let's get the room. So I did it on the spur of the moment. Well, he was an East German engineer. And we talked, and we spent 3 days walking around Prague together. And he thought that America was a Nazi nation. He had read in the East German news about George Lincoln, Rockwell, and all this stuff. He thought America was on the verge of becoming a Nazi state. He was very disappointed when I told him that these people were just laughing stocks and had no power whatsoever in our country. But yeah, you can't believe this stuff. They tell us that Russia is some sort of despotism. Yeah, I spent a month in Russia, and anything but a despotism. I felt freer in Russia than I feel in America.
So would you recommend that white people of our mindset consider moving to Russia? Or, I think that Hungary is a little bit more attractive climate-wise.
Well, I can't recommend that because it's running away. It's what our ancestors did when they ran away from. I have a lot of Puritan ancestors in New England. And they ran away when the Stuarts began chopping Calvinist ears off and chopping their noses off and putting them in the stocks. They got on the boats and came to Massachusetts and Connecticut. Well, which group of Puritans were better, the ones that got on the boat and ran away, or the ones who stayed and confronted Stuart despotism and stopped the king in his tracks? I think the ones who stayed were better than the ones who came to New England. So our job is here. This is our people, and in a sense, it's a betrayal. You're running away. We need people like Fassbinder, however he pronounced his name. People who stay here and try to do something with our people. These are our people. This is where destiny has placed us. But if I were a young guy, if you're a young guy and America really is hopeless, then you could. People our age, yours and our age, just could not function very well going to a foreign country. It's work living in a foreign country. I speak Russian, and I spent a month in Russia. I was received rapturously by Russians. They were thrilled when they met an American who spoke their language and was sympathetic to them and knew their history. But I have to admit that even as disenchanted as I am with life in America, it was something of a relief to get out of the plane in Atlanta and be around Southerners and people I grew up with and people who spoke English. It's work speaking a foreign language. Not easy.
Well, it's definitely interesting. As far as Western Europe goes, I think that any American of our mindset would be absolutely miserable. There's less freedom of speech in Western Europe for us, anyhow, than there is in the United States, and never.
There's less de jure, but there's more de facto.
Okay, tell me what you mean by that, because I don't get the feeling that I don't think that get the feeling that Alfred Schaefer is feeling a great deal of de facto freedom of speech right now.
Well, Charles Lindbergh commented that when he went to Nazi Germany, there was more freedom of speech than in America. We have to be very careful what we say. When you go to a restaurant, you have to look over your shoulder and start talking about immigration or migrants or Black people or Jews. You have to be very careful what you say. And I don't think that, I think that just circulating around in Europe, I think that there's more freedom of thought in Europe than there is here. Yeah, almost every European country except England has a political party that has significant ballot position that is on our side, or at least ostensibly on our side. They're light years ahead of us. We don't have anything like the Fratelli d'Italia, as bad as Giorgia Meloni is. We don't have anything like the Freiheitspartei in Austria, or the Alternative for Deutschland, or the Swedish Democrats. We don't have anybody in office like Orban. We don't have anybody like Putin in our government. Europe is far ahead of us. They're far ahead of us.
I just realized we were getting feedback from the phone. Can you still hear me okay?
I can hear you. I probably wasn't holding it correct.
Well, anyhow, I thought it was a very interesting question because basically I know some people who left California and they moved to Missouri, and they were just horrified that Missouri, that they thought was still American heartland, uh, basically treated them as uh, undesirable immigrants.
Yeah.
And as far as upholding any sort of traditional conservative ideology, they they were just treated as pariahs and pointed out as oh, these are freaks.
Well, the times will change that. You know, things are changing fast in America.
Well, I don't know. I mean, it all depends. I guess this coming year is going to be a very, very interesting year because uh, the the disposition of the case against Trump is going to be particularly interesting. I think if it catches on that he is an insurrectionist, and if, I mean, I thought that was basically a dead legal issue because every court that had looked at it had rejected it. And all of a sudden, you get this opinion from Colorado, and it lights up the life of the people in charge of the Washington Post and the New York Times, and they're just cheering, and oh, there's finally hope for America again.
There are all kinds of things that can happen, Charles. There are more things that can happen. What if Trump, and I don't think Trump will win the election. I think he'll be in jail, but he doesn't deserve to be, but he will be. But what would happen if he won on the election? You read in the Constitution, doesn't what do you call the oldest elected official, member of the Senate? I'm having a senior moment. The senator with the oldest time in the Senate. There's a word for him. Anyway, he tabulates the ballots from the state, and then the Senate approves it, and it's sent down to the House, and the House receives it, and then the House declares who's won the election. Well, I can easily imagine the Senate, the oldest member of the Senate, the longest serving Senate member, just saying, no, I don't accept this. Trump has not been elected because he's an insurrectionist, and so I declare that Biden has been elected. And then the House would just say, yes, Biden's been elected. It'd be just an insurrection by the courts, and what you have in Colorado is an insurrection by the court. But this would be an insurrection by the, I don't know why I can't think of the name of the oldest serving member of the Senate.
Who is the oldest serving member of the Senate these days?
I cannot remember. For Pete's sake, what do you call it? Anyway, but
who is the oldest serving member of the Senate? We've got to find this out. None of these are still in the Senate. It lists Robert Byrd, Strom Thurmond, Dan Inouye. Is Patrick Leahy still there? No, he's not.
No, the question should be who has served the longest number of years in the Senate, and try to get the name for that position.
I guess it would be Charles Grassley then. 42, Republican of Iowa, 42 years, 1 month, 7 days.
Yeah. Anyway, but I can see the House rejecting the thing and just declaring Biden to be president. These people are out of control. I mean, they're really out of control. But, keeping 1,800 people arrested for an insurrection which nobody carried a gun. people getting 8-year sentences who weren't even there, no bail, solitary confinement, and there's just no stopping these people. People like Nancy Pelosi, I hate to keep naming the same ones, but Anderson Cooper and Mary Louise Kelly, these people are just out of control. There's nothing that will stop them. There's no moral restraint whatsoever.
And that is the fault entirely of the American people. Because the American people do still have the power to impose some moral restraint on people. And maybe that's the worst thing we can say, is that there is basically no popular will for good government at all, is there?
Well, to have a constitutional system, which you seem to believe in, you have to have people who are willing to obey the Constitution and to make the leaders obey the Constitution, even when obeying the Constitution means going against their own faction and against what they want. And you just don't have that in America anymore. You know, all these liberals, I was with a relative of mine who's a very brilliant woman. She's a clinical psychologist, and I was with her 2 days ago, and I stopped at her house on my way down here from Atlanta. And she said that she hopes Trump goes to jail. And I raised the issue of Nancy Pelosi's violating over 2 centuries of American constitutional practice by not having Republicans represented on the January 6th committee in proportion to their membership in the House. Historically, we've always had a situation in which if the oppositional party had 40% of the members of the House, it got 40% of the seats on the committees. Well, Nancy changed that. She arbitrarily reduced the number of Republicans to 2 on a committee of 9. So she cut them to less than half of the number. There should have been at least 4. Should have been 4 and 5 Democrats. Then Nancy announced that she was going to name the members of the opposition party that were going to go on the committee. That's never been done before either. So you look at things like that. And so I mentioned this to this cousin of mine, who's a very brilliant woman, and her attitude was basically, I don't care. You know, people, how many Biden supporters care that people are being held for 18 months and 2 years without bond? People who've never committed another crime, people who have families, who have jobs. The suffering of somebody in jail for 18 months is tremendous. If they lose 18 months, 2 years of earning power, it takes 10 or 15 years to recover financially from something like that. But the Biden voters don't care. Naturally, the minority Biden voters, the regime support groups, the feminists, the politically active homosexuals, the blacks, the Hispanics, the Jews, they don't care. They never have cared. But you get people like my cousin who are simply liberals, and now they go along with stuff that they would have been appalled at 20 years ago. So you can't have a constitutional order when people will not require their own side to obey the rules. You can't have a football game in which one of the football teams will not obey the rules. And we have a football team now that will not obey the rules. And we have bought off umpires in the courts that are going along with them. So I think rather than my being a foolish enthusiast with my idea that the system's coming to an end, it seems to me that anybody that believes you can do anything politically, ultimately, voting, is just not reading the tea leaves. Demographics alone, everything we say about immigration and demographics should show us there is no hope in the system. Well, do you think
And
I'm
yet there's
wrong?
equally no hope in armed revolution either.
I don't know of any case in history which there's been an armed revolution that's overthrown a government. Every case I know about in history, the government has overthrown itself. Charles I overthrew himself. He wasn't overthrown by the Puritans. He overthrew himself. Louis XVI overthrew himself. Tsar Nicholas overthrew himself. And our government is busy overthrowing itself. I'm absolutely opposed to any kind of planning to go out in the streets and overthrow the government. I think we plan on what we do when the rotten ripe fig falls off the tree, and that's what we do. You never any suggestion of that is going to lead you going to jail. They're going to take your words like they've taken Trump's words at the rally on January 6th. You know, fight for your rights. That's been turned around now that this was his incitement to an insurrection. Imagine if that standard were used on Dr. King or Hubert Humphrey or Bill Clinton and all kinds of other people. You know, but they will use that. So we have to be very careful. I'm not advocating armed revolution. I'm advocating just letting the system destroy itself. And it's doing a wonderful job of that.
Well, I don't know. It's just, I mean, should we all just join monasteries and go,
That would help, actually. I think learning to meditate is it certainly makes my life a lot better. It makes me much more productive. But no, there are things you can do. You can make a way for yourself financially. You can live below your means and save money. You can establish networks and friendships with other people. You can give money to people. Yeah, I've given a great deal of money over the years to people like Sam Francis and Joe Sobran when they were both fired from Sobran from National Review by odious Bill Buckley, and Sam from the Washington Times. If you're not sending money to people like Sobran and Sam Francis, then you're answering your question of why isn't anybody doing anything. It's pathetic that American Renaissance has to gasp along on a budget of a few $100,000 a year, while these leftist groups have $1 billion like Black Lives Matter. We don't have that kind of money, but there are plenty of people who could be giving $1,000 a year to American Renaissance. Is their future, is the safety of their children and grandchildren not worth $1,000 a year? What is wrong with them?
well, I mean, I guess that part of the problem is that American Renaissance, like most other strong right-wing pro-white groups, it's all talk. They don't participate in the political system. There is not a single American.
The talk has a great influence. We've made tremendous strides in science, and American Renaissance has chronicled that and promoted that. You know, the racial egalitarian side has just completely lost out in science. You know, science has decided that genetics are more important than environment, and the races are not equal. It's only hacks like Heidi Birish of the SPLC that go around talking about, you know, how science has proven that the races are equal. That'd be like somebody in 1499 going around saying that science has established that the world is flat. You know, it's just, these people are ridiculous. But no, they do a valuable thing. And if that's not to your liking, then give money to the American Justice Party or whatever. But you've got to just stop talking the talk. You've got to walk the walk. And there should be, when somebody loses a job, like Sam Francis did or Joe Sobran did, you need to help them.
Very, very valid points. I mean, that's, I guess, how at least the fascists in Italy got their start, was as a trade union and providing a certain amount of economic and employment security to its members.
Well, here again, there are things we can do. I think people have a duty, if they have the ability, to acquire a small business, and so they can give jobs to people where Antifa cannot dox them. And the people who get the jobs, this is another problem I've seen, is many of them feel that they're entitled to just be given a check. No, if somebody sets up a business and hires you because you are a racial movement comrade, you need to do the job. You know, you need to do the work. But we need to create jobs for our people, and there are lots of things that can be done. All kinds of things that can be done. You know, you can try to subvert the smart kids. I do that. I've watched for
Traverse
ads.
what? Traverse what?
Subvert the smart kids, subvert the future leaders. I've looked for things in the paper where there have been lists of kids that got on the National Honor Society in high school, and I've tracked down when I could their parents' addresses, and I've mailed them material from our stuff, sensible material, not screwball things, but things that could provoke them to think. I've done it for prep schools. I've mailed it to the senior classes of prep schools, which created a media furor in Atlanta. And in one of which I was identified by the local spokesman for the ADL that I wrote books under the name of Wilmot Robertson, and I had written the Dispossessed Majority. I wish I had the ability to produce a book like that, but of course I don't have the ability. I was a friend of Wilmot's, but I called his wife up, who lived in fear of trouble because of her husband's activity. And I said, Mary, I've got good news and bad news. She said, what's that? I said, the bad news is that Wilmot Robertson has been identified in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution by the ADL. And said, oh my God, that's terrible. I said, the good news is that his real name is Sam Dickson. She said, that is good news. They'll kill you instead of us.
I'd hope she got a good laugh out of that.
She did. She's a nice woman.
Oh, that's amazing. Well, it's very very confusing because I guess I was saying the other day on this podcast that I regret giving up the concept of constitutional government, because it is one of the most eloquent statements of political idealism that was ever written. It is so rooted in tradition and yet streamlined. It's an amazing synthesis of basically some very, in some ways, some very primitive ideas. The concept of tripartite government is really it's not just John Locke. It's certainly not just the Constitution. It goes back to the most ancient roots of Indo-European Aryan people, and yet it was never framed quite so well as in the American Constitution, and it is something that gives. Greg Johnson a couple of months ago wrote, "Is there such a thing as an American ethnic identity?" And he said that there was, and I would have to say that, to me, the Constitution really is part of that American identity. You don't agree?
No,
Not at all.
the people are what matters. The people can write another constitution. The Constitution is a piece of paper, and it was tried. You're right. There was a lot of nice things about it. There were a lot of terribly dumb things about it. The ruler of Haiti, Dessalines, after he massacred all the white people, was shrewd enough to write a constitution for Haiti that provided that no white man could ever be a citizen of Haiti and could own so much as 1 square inch of Haitian soil. So in that respect, his IQ was higher than that of the founding fathers in Independence Hall when they drew up the Constitution. They made a lot of mistakes, and it failed.
I mean, they didn't write it into the Constitution, but they did write it into the first Immigration Act.
That's the Constitution, what mattered. It needed to be enshrined. The very first paragraph should have been, the following people are qualified to be citizens of the United States, and no others are qualified, nor are they permitted to own anything in America or to reside here. That should have been the first paragraph. But it was a noble idea. I was once attached to it. I don't have any loyalist, any Tory ancestors in our revolution. I'm descended from a general in the revolution. But the brutal fact, the undeniable fact is the Constitution did not work to protect us. It has failed. It took about 200 years to fail utterly, but it has utterly failed now. And it cannot work in a country with the demographics of the United States. That's just clearly the case. You could take that Constitution word to word and give it to Haiti or Zambia. Would it matter? No, it wouldn't matter. And so, the British have no written constitution, but they have a reasonably recognizable legal system. Theirs, like ours, is failing. But you cannot look back. You have to look to the future. The Constitution failed, even with an Anglo-Saxon population. It cannot work now, in which whites are going to be a minority. You just can't do it. We have to wake up and smell the coffee. We have to find another solution.
Well, none immediately obvious to me is all I can say, because if we can't have an armed revolution and we can't have an unarmed revolution through the ballot box, then we just have to wait. We have to wait on external forces, and counting on the stupidity of the people who affected the transformation of America over the past 100 to 150 years doesn't seem like good business, because basically they started off with a nearly perfect country that was perfectly anathema to everything that they wanted it to be. And starting in 1860, 1861, they transformed it slowly but surely, step by step, inch by inch, into a nightmare. We live in a nightmare now. I mean, you don't live in a nightmare in Key West. That looks pretty nice. I don't feel like I live in a nightmare here in New Orleans, but objectively, New Orleans is a big mess. There's no question about it. Our local DA, who's a black man, he was carjacked recently. Can you imagine this? The DA.
That was wonderful.
This is nightmare kind of stuff when the DA himself is carjacked and can't find the people who did it.
Well, you ain't got nothing compared to Atlanta. Atlanta is just remarkable. I'm sure that there are many other cities like it, but I only know the facts of my hometown. And you look at Atlanta, like I said before, mobs of one race were allowed to attack other neighborhoods night after night after night. Thousands of them gathered in crowds and went and looted and burned and so on. Not one single person was ever prosecuted for any of these crimes. Governor Kemp and Mayor Bottoms both ordered that there be no arrests and that the National Guard and the police not interfere. Despite that, 33 people were arrested. I guess these were people that went up and kicked the National Guard in the crotch or something. And so they had to arrest them. Charges were dropped against all of them.
Well, it looks like we're out of time, and we're also out of a fall season. Tomorrow is the winter solstice, and happy beginning of winter to you in the fiendish cold of Key West.
Tested news.
We are setting sail again on the Flying Dutchman.
Right, under the black cloud.
I'll see you in another season. Good night, Sam. This is good night, everybody else from New Orleans and Key West.